The air in the conference hall felt heavy with tension, though for him it was electrifying. He had just walked out of a meeting clutching the contract he thought would change everything. For months, he had been eyeing this deal, competing with stronger companies, ones with bigger names and deeper pockets. He knew that on merit alone, he might never win. But tonight, none of that mattered. He had bent the truth, hidden costs, and whispered promises he knew he could never fully keep. The clients signed, smiling, believing they were securing the best deal on the table. He, in turn, smiled back, telling himself that victory was all that mattered. That night, he celebrated. The champagne glass trembled slightly in his hand as he raised it in triumph. The room was filled with laughter, the sound of congratulations, and the warmth of success. Yet deep down, beneath the layers of pride, there was a hollow space, an echo that wouldn't quiet. He silenced it quickly, convincing himself that every great business move required sacrifice, that everyone cheated a little, and that the world never rewarded the honest man. But even as he soaked in the glow of victory, there were cracks in the illusion. His closest friend, a retired businessman who had walked away from wealth with his reputation intact, gave him a quiet look during the celebration. It wasn't a look of admiration or pride, but one of caution, almost pity. He brushed it off, laughing louder, filling the air with empty joy. The days that followed were golden. His name appeared in newspapers, his company hailed as a rising star. New doors opened, investors called, and his phone never stopped ringing. Success had finally come to him, or so he believed. Each morning, he walked into his office with a sense of triumph, as if he had conquered the world. He sat at his desk, polished wood gleaming, and felt untouchable. Yet, in the quiet moments when the applause had faded and the office was still, he caught himself thinking about the promises he had made in that contract. The truth he had twisted lay hidden like a shadow trailing him, one he could not escape. But he pushed those thoughts away, telling himself that by the time anyone noticed, he would already be too successful for it to matter. He believed he had outsmarted the game. What he didn't realize was that the game had just begun, and it was not one he could win without paying the price. The first sign of trouble came quietly, almost unnoticed. A client who had once been eager suddenly postponed a meeting. Another, who had spoken with confidence about long-term partnership, grew strangely distant. At first, he brushed it off as routine shifts in business. After all, he had the contract that everyone envied. What could possibly go wrong? But whispers travel faster than success. Rumors began to spread, subtle at first, carried in hushed conversations in corridors and industry dinners. Someone had discovered hidden clauses in his deal, a small inconsistency that raised questions. Questions became suspicions, and suspicions turned into accusations. Soon, his name no longer carried the weight of admiration, but the sting of doubt. Contracts that had seemed secure began to unravel. Clients withdrew quietly, some offering vague excuses about restructuring, others refusing to return calls altogether. His office, once buzzing with activity, began to feel like an empty shell. The phones still rang, but not with opportunity only, with inquiries about the truth behind his contract. He could feel the walls of his empire trembling, but he told himself it was only temporary. He had climbed too high to fall now. Yet the truth has a way of stripping away illusions. One morning he walked into his office and found two of his most trusted employees handing in their resignations. They avoided his eyes, speaking with voices heavy with disappointment. They had believed in him, trusted his leadership, and now felt betrayed. It was not only contracts he was losing, it was the very foundation of loyalty and respect. As days turned into weeks, his reputation collapsed faster than he could hold it together. Where there had once been applause, there was silence. Where doors had opened, they now shut firmly in his face. He watched as competitors thrived, not because they had cheated better, but because they had chosen a path he had once dismissed as weak honesty. The nights grew darker. He sat alone in his grand home, surrounded by wealth that now felt empty. The champagne bottles on the shelves looked like trophies mocking him, relics of a hollow victory. Even the laughter from his earlier celebration haunted him, sounding false in his memory, like echoes in an empty chamber. It was in this darkness that his old friend returned. The man who had once looked at him with caution now sat across from him with quiet eyes, neither angry nor judgmental, only firm. He listened as the businessman tried to explain, tried to justify, his words tangled between pride and regret. The friend spoke little, only reminding him that success without integrity was nothing more than failure wearing a mask. The words cut deeper than any rumor, because in his heart, he knew they were true. The weight of those words lingered long after his friend had left. For the first time, he sat in the silence of his own choices, stripped of applause, stripped of pretense. He thought about the contracts, the handshakes, the empty victories. He thought about how quickly the cheers had turned into whispers, how trust had dissolved like sand slipping through his fingers. He had chased success with everything he had, but in the process, he had lost the one thing that gave it meaning. The days that followed were not easy. Each morning, he woke with the urge to fight back, to rebuild his empire with the same tricks that had once brought him fortune. But now, every time the thought surfaced, the echo of his friend S. words reminded him of the hollowness he had felt at the height of his success. He realized he could no longer outrun the shadow of his actions. He would have to face it, step by step, even if it meant starting again from the ground. He began small. He called clients he had misled, not to bargain, but to confess. Some hung up on him, unwilling to hear excuses. Others listened, surprised by the humility in his voice. It did not repair his reputation overnight, but each call lifted a piece of the weight pressing on his chest. For the first time in years, he spoke without pretending, without trying to sell a version of himself. He spoke with honesty. His old friend visited again, this time with a softer gaze. He did not praise him, nor did he scold. He simply listened, offering a quiet nod when the businessman admitted his failures. That silence, that simple acceptance, became the first seed of healing. He realized that rebuilding his reputation was not about contracts or profits, but about living with a truth he could stand by. Months passed, and though his company was smaller, though the grand offices were gone, he began to walk with a different kind of pride. Not the pride that came from applause, but the kind that came from knowing he could look someone in the eye without shame. He no longer chased success the way he once had. Instead, he worked steadily, building trust one promise at a time. And in the quiet of those days, he discovered something he had never felt at the height of his fortune: peace. It was not the loud triumph he had once desired, but it was real. Success without integrity had left him empty, but now, even in modest achievements, he felt whole. He finally understood success built on lies will always collapse, but success built on integrity, no matter how small, will stand the test of time. In the end, his story reminds us that the foundation of every true success is not wealth, applause, or recognition, but integrity. Without it, even the greatest victories crumble into dust. With it, even the smallest step forward holds meaning and strength. His journey is not just about business, it is about life, and the quiet courage it takes to remain honest when temptation calls. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect on what integrity means in your own journey. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you found value in this story, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing so that more stories like this can reach those who may need them.